President Donald Trump and Democratic nominee Joe Biden, well, they are back on the campaign trail today after clashing in last night's final debate before Election Day. They faced off in Nashville, Tennessee, vying for support from last-minute undecided voters. Yeah, there's still some out there. The candidates offered starkly different visions for the future of America, especially when it comes to major issues like the pandemic, healthcare, immigration, racism, and climate change. However, they did manage to keep it civil without constant interruptions and shouting like September's showdown. Nikole Killion has more from Nashville.
I've been congratulated by the heads of many countries on what we've been able to do.
As COVID cases rise across the country, President Trump praised his administration's response and teased a vaccine.
We have a vaccine that's coming. It's ready. It's going to be announced within weeks, and it's going to be delivered.
He has no clear plan, and there's no prospect that there's going to be a vaccine available for the majority of the American people before the middle of next year.
The former vice president tore into the president's handling of the pandemic, pointing to the more than 220,000 Americans who have died.
Anyone who's responsible for that many deaths should not remain as president of the United States of America.
The two argued over reopening the economy.
There's not another serious scientist in the world who thinks it's going to be over soon.
Reaction? I say over soon. I say we're learning to live with it. We have no choice. We can't lock ourselves up in a basement like Joe does.
Learning to live with it. Come on. We're dying with it.
I take full responsibility. It's not my fault that he came here.
Biden charged the president was not being stronger against Russia, as intelligence officials said both Russia and Iran are attempting to interfere in the election.
I don't understand why this president is unwilling to take on Putin. Any country that interferes with us will, in fact, pay a price because they're affecting our sovereignty.
While President Trump repeated his allegations about Biden and his family.
Your family got $3.5 million, and you know, someday you're going to have to explain, why did you get 3.5? I never got any money from Russia. I don't get money from Russia.
I have not taken a single penny from any country whatsoever.
Biden accused the president of trying to distract.
There's a reason why he's bringing up all this malarkey. There's a reason for it. He doesn't want to talk about the substantive issues. It's not about his family and my family. It's about your family. And your family's hurting badly. If you're making less than, if you're a middle-class family, you're getting hurt badly right now. You're sitting at the kitchen table this morning deciding, well, we can't get new tires, they're bald because we have to wait another month or so. Or are we going to be able to pay the mortgage?
That's a typical political statement. Let's get off this China thing. And then he looks, the family, around the table, everything. Just a typical politician when I see that.
Let's talk about North Korea.
I'm not a typical politician.
Okay,
that's why I got elected.
The president again claimed he was preparing a health care plan.
So I'd like to terminate Obamacare, come up with a brand new, beautiful health care.
He's never come up with a plan. I guess we're going to get the pre-existing condition plan the same time we get the infrastructure plan.
President Trump was asked if his administration has a plan to reunite children separated from their parents at the border.
Yes, we're working on it we're trying very hard. But a lot of these kids come out without the parents. They come over through cartels and through coyotes and through gangs.
Biden called the policy criminal.
What happened? Parents were ripped, their kids were ripped from their arms and separated. And now they cannot find over 500 sets of those parents, and those kids are alone. Nowhere to go.
They are so well taken care of. They're in facilities that were so clean.
The president, who at the last debate did not denounce white supremacy, was pressed about his rhetoric on race.
I am the least racist person. I can't even see the audience because it's so dark. But I don't care who's in the audience. I'm the least racist person in this room.
The president pushed Biden on his plans on energy and the environment.
Would you close down the oil industry?
By the way, I would transition from the oil industry, yes.
Oh,
I will transition. It is a big statement.
That's a
because
big statement.
I would stop.
Why would you do that?
Because the oil industry pollutes significantly.
I see.
And here's the deal. But
that's
you
a
can't
big
do
statement.
that. Well, if you let me finish the statement, because it has to be replaced by renewable energy over time. Over time.
For more, let's bring in.
All right, we're going to bring in
CBSN
political That's okay. Political reporter Caitlin Huey-Burns to dig into what we saw last night. Caitlin, before we sort of get into some of the issues, just the overall difference, the mood, the fact that we could hear the candidates, the impact of that mute button. But I think it wasn't just the mute button. Kristen Welker did an excellent job, and it also seemed like the candidates were committed to showing a better side to themselves than they did in September.
Yeah, it seems like kind of the threat of the mute button helped to keep these candidates in line, and credit to the stellar moderating from Kristen Welker there. This was, of course, the last chance for these candidates to make their closing arguments with just 11 days to go until Election Day, even though over 47 million people have already cast their ballots. Heading into last night, however, I'm losing track of time here on the road. Heading into last night, the president's advisors were telling him, don't interrupt as much. Let Biden talk and let him stumble. That was a key strategy heading into the final night. Biden didn't stumble, didn't have those big gaffes that the Trump campaign wanted him to try to do something to change up this race. But this was, I think, a chance for voters and viewers at home, and maybe that sliver of voters that may be undecided, to see these candidates really side by side. The contrasts were clear, as they have been throughout the campaign, but this was the kind of debate that was actually a debate.
Yeah, Caitlin, it's interesting to me. There are some who offer anecdotal evidence that perhaps Biden was not as sharp as he should have been on some responses. But what I saw and what I observed is a candidate who was able to hit back when he was hit. I also saw this idea, this notion that has been put out by some of President Trump's surrogates that somehow the vice president isn't all with it, or that he's older than his years. I didn't see that on display last night. Every time Donald Trump went after him for something, the vice president was able to hit back, specifically when it came to the question of his son and some of the controversy swirling around that. Vice President Biden hit Trump back by asking about his alleged secret Chinese bank account.
That's right. Over the course of this campaign, the Trump campaign has really struggled to land a cohesive attack against Biden, kind of going all over the map. And I think something that backfires, and that the campaign has seen has backfired, is that they really lowered the bar for him heading into the debate. That if he completes sentences and speaks sharply, that ends up being a good night. I think an effective line of attack that we saw from the president against Biden was, you've been in office for 47 years, you've held public office at least. What have you actually done? When President Trump was then candidate Trump in 2016, remember, he ran as the outsider, he ran against Washington. Now, of course, he's the incumbent president. He is part of Washington. He is a politician himself by virtue of being president. So do those attacks land as they would have in 2016? That's a question for voters to answer. But what I think we also saw from Biden last night was trying to do no harm, trying to keep this race as it is, because he's leading in key battleground polls. And he also wanted to keep the focus on the coronavirus pandemic, because we see in polling that the president receives negative grades, and that's something that helps Joe Biden. President Trump, however, wanted to keep the focus on Biden's history in public office, and also focusing on the economy, because we know that that's the one kind of silver lining for Trump, is that we see him getting positive grades on the economy, and that's something driving his supporters. I will say, Republicans wanted from the president last night, not only for the president's re-election campaign, but also for some of these down ballot candidates, really tough re-election fights for some of these Republican senators. The Republican Party is trying to hold on to their majority in the Senate. So Republicans are saying this morning that they feel that the president not only did his campaign a service, but also did a service to some of those down ballot Republicans. But Vlad and Anne-Marie, as we all know, who knows what's going to happen in the next hour or so, given how we've seen the president can have a night and then change the entire message within minutes.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that sort of struck me as I was watching the debate is that a lot of what we heard from the president, we actually have been hearing. We've been hearing it in his speeches. And when he was sort of called upon to give the audience new information, whether it was detailed information, concrete information about what the health plan is going forward, what the next 4 years would look like going forward, when he had an opportunity to sort of map out what his inauguration speech would be or whatever, he pivoted back to Joe Biden. He just sort of, and even when it came to the pandemic, he pivoted back to closing the borders to China. I feel like there was an opportunity there to give us something new, and the president kind of didn't take that opportunity.
That's right. The strategy going in for the president had to be to do something to fundamentally change the future of this race. And the messaging that you heard, I think, last night, to me seemed more like trying to keep the Republican Party and the Republican base kind of intact and kind of reach out to some of those Republican voters who may have been turned off by the president's rhetoric and may have been looking for an excuse to end up kind of coming back into the fold. But in terms of expanding his base of support, it's not clear that he did that, and that's something that he's going to need to do, especially in these key battleground states. We talk a lot about comparing polls from 2016 to now, but often supporters of the president forget to mention the election results in 2018, where we saw women, particularly in the suburbs, leave the Republican Party and support Democrats. That's something to keep an eye on as we're kind of talking about how to expand your base of support. We've also seen the president lagging behind his numbers in 2016 among senior voters, a core constituency, of course, in a state like Florida. So did the president do anything to expand his support? Did he do anything to not only reach out to other kinds of voters, but remember, 47 million people have already voted. Does this do much to change the trajectory? The big question, I think, as we're looking at those early vote totals is how many of those are new voters or how many voters are actually going to show up on Election Day?
Caitlin, Anne-Marie pointed out that the president and you also talked about that one sort of line of attack, which is something we've heard from the president and his surrogates over the last couple of days and weeks, which is that Joe Biden had 47 years to do something, and why didn't you do it? That, I think, is an effective criticism, if you will, of the vice president. But the other sort of, I thought, moment that the president had was when he said that I ran for president because of you and Barack Obama. That is something we've heard over and over from President Trump's supporters. One of the reasons that they like him, they see him as a rejection of the Obama-Biden administration and those years. But then the president sort of undermines it in a couple of ways. Number one, when Vice President Biden talked about the families who are suffering, who are not going to have a loved one at the dinner table when it comes to this Thanksgiving or for the holidays, the 220,000 Americans who have succumbed to the coronavirus, the number of jobs that have been lost. The president mocked that notion. The president mocked Vice President Biden, suggesting that he was talking to those people who might feel, saddened by the turn of events with the coronavirus, because the president said we're learning to live with the coronavirus. Vice President Biden said a lot of people are learning to die with it. So there was that aspect of the president sort of not showing and displaying any empathy. Now, maybe his supporters don't care about that, but there are a lot of Americans who do, who want a president who empathizes with their situation. The other big question, and we talk about this every time, is the race issue. And again, the president of the United States saying something that I thought was interesting. Margaret Brennan, the moderator of Face the Nation, commented on this, that the president says, well, I'm the least racist person in the room. First of all, the moderator is a black woman, so maybe not. But this notion that you reject any discussion around race in America by returning it back to yourself. It's about me. I'm the least racist person in the room. Where the question was about systemic racism in our institutions, systemic racism that people encounter on the streets every day, the talk that black and brown families have to have with their children when it comes to interaction with the police. The president seems to think it's just about how he is, his personal relationships that he has with the black people in his administration and that he knows?
Sure, and an easy, quick fact check on that statement is that this is someone who came to prominent political life leading the birther movement against former President Obama. I think that kind of tells you everything you need to know about that response.
Yeah. All right, Caitlin Huey-Burns for us. Caitlin, thank you very much. We appreciate it.